They called her crazy, a delusional woman in economy class claiming to be a legendary pilot. The flight attendants smirked. The pilots ignored her warnings. Then, at 35,000 feet, the engine exploded exactly as she predicted. Now military jets were scrambling, recognizing one voice on the emergency radio. "This is Falcon." Jade Martinez sat in seat 27E, squeezed between two strangers on United Flight 1823. She wore old jeans and a faded sweatshirt from a university she'd attended 20 years ago. Her dark hair was tied back in a messy ponytail. She had no makeup on. She looked tired, like someone who worked 2 jobs just to pay rent. The man next to her in seat 27D was snoring softly. The woman in 27F was reading a romance novel with a shirtless man on the cover. Neither of them looked at Jade. Nobody on the plane looked at her. She was invisible. That was exactly what Jade wanted. For 3 years, she had been trying to disappear. For 3 years, she had been running from her past. Because 3 years ago, Jade Martinez was not sitting in economy class. 3 years ago, she was Colonel Jade Falcon Martinez, one of the best test pilots in the United States Air Force. She had flown 73 different types of aircraft. She had tested experimental fighter jets that could break the sound barrier. She had trained astronauts. She was a legend. Her call sign was Falcon because she could spot problems in aircraft that other pilots missed. She could feel when something was wrong with a plane the same way a falcon can spot a tiny mouse from a mile up in the sky. Her hands could feel vibrations through the controls that instruments couldn't detect. Other pilots called it a gift. Jade called it paying attention. Then she discovered something that destroyed her career. The Air Force had asked her to test a new engine for commercial passenger jets, the Turbodyne X7, built by a company called Apex Industries. The engine was beautiful, powerful, and efficient. Airlines loved it. Apex Industries had orders for hundreds of these engines, worth billions of dollars. But the engine had a fatal flaw. During test flights, Jade felt something wrong. Tiny vibrations at certain power settings, so small the instruments didn't catch them. But Jade's hands felt them through the control stick, and she knew those vibrations meant trouble. She ran diagnostic tests. She studied the data. She found what she was looking for: hairline cracks in the turbine blades deep inside the engine. The cracks were tiny, but they would grow over time. Eventually they would cause the turbine blades to break apart, and when that happened, the engine would explode. Jade wrote detailed reports. She presented her findings to Apex Industries and the Federal Aviation Administration. She showed them the data. She explained the danger. She told them these engines could kill people. Apex Industries said she was wrong. They had billions of dollars invested in the X7 engine, and airlines had already ordered hundreds of them. If Apex admitted there was a flaw, the company would go bankrupt. So they denied everything. They hired their own experts, who said Jade's data was wrong, that she had made mistakes in her tests, that she was trying to hurt their company, that she was lying. When Jade refused to back down, they removed her from the testing program. Then they forced her to retire from the Air Force. Then they started threatening her. Someone told her, "If you keep talking about this, accidents happen, bad accidents." Jade went to journalists. She went to aviation safety boards. She tried to tell Congress, but Apex Industries had expensive lawyers and powerful friends. Without access to the engines, Jade couldn't get more proof, and her evidence wasn't enough. 3 years ago, someone broke into her apartment and stole all her research files. A week later, a car tried to run her off the road. That's when Jade Martinez disappeared. She moved to a tiny town in Montana where nobody knew her. She changed how she looked. She got a job as a mechanical engineer at a small factory. She stopped talking about airplanes. She stopped being Falcon. She told herself she had tried her best, that she had done everything she could. Sometimes you can't fight big companies with unlimited money. Sometimes you have to accept defeat. But every time she saw a plane flying overhead, she wondered, does that plane have X7 engines? Is today the day the engines fail and people die? For 3 years, Jade didn't fly anywhere. She drove everywhere, even long trips, because she was too scared to get on a plane. But today she was on Flight 1823 from Denver to Boston, because her nephew was getting married. The ticket was expensive and non-refundable. She couldn't afford to waste the money. When she checked in at the gate, she asked the agent a casual question: "What kind of engines does this plane have?" The agent smiled and checked her computer. "Turbodyne X7S. They're the newest and best engines." Jade's stomach dropped like she was falling. But the ticket was paid for, and she had no choice. So she got on the plane, found her middle seat in economy class, and tried to stay calm. She told herself, millions of flights happen every day, the chances of an engine failing on this specific flight are tiny. Maybe she had been wrong about the defect. Maybe the cracks weren't as dangerous as she thought. But 30 minutes into the flight, at 35,000 feet above Kansas, Jade felt it, the vibration. Most passengers wouldn't have noticed it. It was subtle, hidden under the normal hum of the engines and the whoosh of air outside. But Jade wasn't most passengers. She had spent 20 years in cockpits learning to listen to what aircraft were telling her, and the vibration had a specific frequency pattern, the same pattern she had felt in the test aircraft 3 years earlier, right before a stress crack started spreading through the turbine blades. Her heart began to pound. She pressed the call button above her seat. A minute later, a flight attendant arrived, young and cheerful, with perfectly styled hair. His name tag said Derek. "What can I get you, ma'am?" he asked with a bright smile. "I need to speak with the pilots," Jade said quietly, trying to stay calm. Derek's smile didn't change. "Is there a problem?" "Yes. The left engine. There's a vibration in it. It's not normal." Derek glanced toward the front of the plane. "The flight is very smooth right now, ma'am. We're not experiencing any turbulence." "It's not turbulence," Jade said. "It's a mechanical problem with the engine. Please, I really need to talk to the pilots." Derek's professional smile got a little tighter. "Ma'am, I can assure you this aircraft is functioning perfectly. All our instruments are normal. If you're feeling nervous about flying, that's completely understandable. Some people find flying stressful. I can get you some water." "I'm not nervous about flying," Jade interrupted. "I'm a pilot. I know what I'm hearing. That engine has a defect. You need to let me speak to the cockpit crew right now." Derek's smile disappeared. His voice became firm. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to calm down. If you continue to disrupt the flight." "I'm not disrupting anything. I'm trying to save this plane." Derek made eye contact with another flight attendant across the cabin and waved her over. They whispered to each other. Jade heard the words, "nervous passenger," and "causing a scene." The second flight attendant, an older woman named Patricia, approached Jade with a concerned but stern expression. "Ma'am," Patricia said, in a voice like a disappointed teacher, "we understand you're concerned about something, but making alarmist statements on an aircraft is a serious issue. You're frightening other passengers." "I'm not being alarmist." Jade's voice rose despite her efforts to stay calm. "Listen to me. My name is Colonel Jade Martinez. My call sign is Falcon. I'm a military test pilot, or I was. Those engines on this plane are Turbodyne X7s, and they have a documented defect that I personally discovered. That vibration I'm hearing is the first sign of turbine blade stress fractures. If it continues, that engine will fail catastrophically. Please, you have to let me speak to the pilots." Patricia and Derek exchanged a look. Jade saw what they were thinking. They saw a tired, ordinary-looking woman in economy class, wearing cheap clothes, claiming to be a famous military pilot. They thought she was crazy. "Ma'am," Patricia said carefully, like she was talking to a confused child, "I'm sure you believe what you're saying, but we have protocols. I cannot let a passenger into the cockpit based on unverified claims." "Then tell the pilots yourself," Jade said, desperate now. "Tell them Falcon says the left engine is showing pre-failure vibration signatures consistent with X7 turbine defects. Those exact words, they'll understand what it means." Derek actually smirked. "Falcon. Right, of course." He turned to Patricia. "Should we get the captain involved, or just ask her to sit down and be quiet?" "Ma'am," Patricia said firmly, "you need to return to your seat immediately. If you continue this behavior, we will have no choice but to restrain you and have police meet the aircraft when we land." Jade looked at their faces, at the passengers nearby who were all staring at her now. She saw it in their eyes. They thought she was the crazy lady, the unstable passenger having some kind of breakdown. She sat down slowly, her hands shaking. Derek and Patricia walked away, talking quietly to each other. Jade caught the words, delusional, and possible mental health issue. The man in seat 27D had woken up from all the noise. "You okay?" he asked. "No," Jade whispered. "No, I'm not okay. But nobody is going to believe me until it's too late." She pulled out her phone. It was in airplane mode, so she couldn't call anyone. She opened her notes app and started doing calculations based on the vibration frequency she was hearing. The math was bad, very bad. Based on the pattern, the engine had maybe 20 to 30 minutes before the stress cracks reached critical size. When that happened, the turbine blades would shatter and the engine would explode. They were somewhere over Kansas now. Denver was far behind them. Boston was still hours ahead. There were no major airports nearby for an emergency landing. Jade watched the clock on her phone. 15 minutes passed. The vibration continued, getting slightly worse. 20 minutes. She could hear the frequency changing, rising. 22 minutes. At 23 minutes, the engine exploded. The sound was so loud it felt like the plane had been hit by a missile, a massive boom that shook the entire aircraft. People screamed. The plane lurched violently to the left. Oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling, dangling on their tubes. More screaming. Someone was crying. A child wailed for their mother. Jade looked out the window on the left side of the plane. The engine was on fire. Huge orange flames shot out of it. She could see pieces of the turbine blades, twisted chunks of metal, flying off into the sky. The engine was tearing itself apart exactly as she had predicted. The captain's voice came over the intercom, trying to sound calm, but Jade could hear the controlled panic underneath. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have experienced an engine failure. Please remain seated with your seat belts fastened. We are diverting to the nearest airport. Please remain calm." But Jade heard something else in his voice that the other passengers wouldn't catch: uncertainty, fear. Because this wasn't just a simple engine failure. The engine was on fire, and if that fire spread to the wing fuel tanks, the entire aircraft would become a flying bomb. She unbuckled her seat belt and stood up. Derek appeared instantly, pushing through the panicking passengers. "Ma'am, sit down right now. I told you this would happen." Jade's voice cut through the noise in the cabin like a knife. "I told you the engine would fail. I told you there was a defect. And if you don't let me help right now, that fire is going to spread to the fuel tanks and we are all going to die." Patricia was there too, trying to push Jade back into her seat. "Ma'am, if you don't sit down immediately. Listen to me." Jade grabbed Patricia's arm and looked directly into her eyes. "My name is Colonel Jade Martinez. My call sign is Falcon. I am the test pilot who discovered the X7 defect 3 years ago. I know this engine inside and out. I know what's happening right now, and I know what's about to happen next. And I know how to save this aircraft. Now you can let me into that cockpit, or you can watch 267 people burn to death. Your choice. Make it fast." There was something in Jade's voice, the absolute authority of someone who had spent 20 years commanding military pilots, that made both flight attendants freeze. The plane shuddered again, harder this time. The aircraft was shaking like it was coming apart. More people screamed. Patricia looked at Derek. Derek looked back at Patricia. They were thinking the same thing. What if she's telling the truth? Patricia made a decision. "Come with me now. But if you're lying about who you are." "I'm not lying." The cockpit was chaos. Alarms were screaming. Red lights flashed all over the instrument panel. The captain and first officer were fighting with the controls, trying to keep the plane stable. "Who is this?" the captain snapped, without looking away from his instruments. His name tag read Mitchell. "She says she's a pilot," Patricia said. "She predicted the engine failure before it happened." "My name is Colonel Jade Martinez," Jade said, already scanning the instrument panel with trained eyes. "Call sign Falcon. That engine out there is a Turbodyne X7. I discovered the defect in that engine 3 years ago. Nobody believed me. You need to shut off the fuel flow to that engine immediately and deploy the fire suppression system right now, before the fire reaches the wing fuel tank." Captain Mitchell's head snapped toward her, his eyes wide with shock. "Falcon, you're supposed to be dead. Disappeared. Crazy." "I've heard all of it," Jade interrupted. "Fire suppression system. Deploy it now." Already deployed, said the first officer, a young woman with short blonde hair. Her name tag said more, and her voice was shaking. The fire isn't going out. Jade leaned over the center console, studying the fire warning panel. The suppression isn't working because the turbine fracture damaged the suppression lines. You need to use the alternate fire suppression system. Switch to manual override on panel C and actuate the backup bottles. Mitchell stared at her. There is no alternate fire suppression. Yes, there is, Jade cut him off. It's not in the standard operating manual because it's only for catastrophic engine failures. It's in the emergency procedures addendum nobody ever reads. Panel C, 3 switches down, behind the red safety guard. Do it now. Mitchell hesitated for exactly 1 second, then reached over, flipped open the red guard, and threw the 3 switches Jade had pointed to. A different alarm sounded on the fire warning panel. New lights came on. More fire suppression foam was pumped into the engine. The fire warning light flickered, dimmed, then went out completely. Moore let out a breath she'd been holding. Fire's out. Oh my God, the fire's out. How did you know about that system? Because I wrote that emergency procedure, Jade said. After I discovered the defect, I knew the standard fire suppression wouldn't work if the turbine fracture was severe enough. Now listen carefully. That engine is structurally compromised. The mounts holding it to the wing are damaged. You cannot use asymmetric thrust for landing, or the stress will cause the damaged mounts to fail completely and the engine will tear off the wing. You need to land with one engine, dead stick approach, without using differential power. Can you do that? Mitchell and Moore looked at each other. Neither spoke. We've never done that, Mitchell finally said. We've trained for engine-out landings, but not with damaged mounts. Not dead stick. I have, Jade said. 73 times, in test scenarios. Give me the controls. You're a passenger, Mitchell said. FAA regulations say I cannot turn over aircraft command. The plane lurched violently to the left. More alarms screamed. The damaged engine was pulling loose from its mounts. Captain Mitchell, Jade said, her voice ice cold and completely calm, that engine is going to tear completely off the wing in approximately 5 minutes. When it does, you will lose hydraulic lines, fuel lines, and possibly wing structural integrity. This aircraft will become unflyable. I have landed test aircraft with this exact type of damage more than 70 times. You have never done it once. So you have 2 choices right now. Let me help you, or kill everyone on board because your ego won't let you trust a woman in economy class who knows more than you do. Make your choice fast. Mitchell looked at Moore. Moore gave a tiny nod. What do you need? Mitchell asked. I need you on throttle control for the good engine, Jade said. Moore, you're on systems management. I'll talk you both through an approach profile you've never trained for. And you need to trust me completely. No second guessing, no hesitation. When I say do something, you do it instantly. Understood. Understood, they both said. Mitchell grabbed the radio. Denver Center, this is United Flight 1823. We have Colonel Jade Martinez aboard, call sign Falcon. She's providing technical assistance for landing with a catastrophically damaged engine. There was a long pause on the radio. Then a different voice came through, military, official, and shocked. United 1823, say again, did you say Falcon? Colonel Jade Martinez. Affirmative, Mitchell said. Jade took the radio handset from him. Denver Center, this is Falcon. I'm aboard United 1823. We are flying with a failed X-7 engine, exactly as I warned 3 years ago these engines would fail. Now I need you to scramble emergency response to Kansas City International, because I am going to bring this aircraft down in approximately 12 minutes. Another pause. Then, Falcon, this is General Hawthorne, Air Force Strategic Command. Colonel Martinez, we thought you were gone. Jade felt her throat tighten. General Hawthorne had been her commanding officer once, a long time ago. I was hiding, General. The people who built these defective engines made it clear that speaking up about them was bad for my health. But right now there are 267 people on this plane who are going to die unless someone who understands X-7 failure mechanics can land this aircraft. Can we discuss my disappearance later and focus on not crashing right now? Roger that, Falcon, General Hawthorne said. She could hear emotion in his voice. What do you need? I need the longest runway at Kansas City completely cleared. I need it phoned. I need every piece of crash rescue equipment you have standing by on both sides. This is going to be a very hard landing, General. Consider it done, Falcon. It's really good to hear your voice again. It's good to use it again, sir. Martinez out. For the next 10 minutes, Jade coordinated the most difficult landing of her life. She had Mitchell fly an approach that violated every standard commercial aviation procedure but followed test pilot protocols for bringing down aircraft with catastrophic damage. She had more systematically shut down non-essential systems to reduce weight and power consumption. She calculated approach speed, descent rate, and flare timing for a landing where one tiny mistake would cause the aircraft to cartwheel down the runway and explode. Outside the cockpit windows, news helicopters filmed everything. On the ground, every aviation expert watching was certain they were about to witness a disaster. But Jade's voice never wavered. She spoke with absolute calm and certainty. Captain Mitchell, hold this descent rate steady, she said. Don't touch the rudder. Any asymmetric drag could stress the damaged mounts and tear the engine off. More, prepare to drop landing gear on my mark. When I tell you to flare, Mitchell, you're going to pull back smooth but firm. We're going to hit the runway harder than any landing you've ever done, but it will be controlled. Trust me. The runway appeared ahead through the windscreen. Jade could see emergency vehicles lined up on both sides, fire trucks, ambulances, crash rescue teams. The damaged engine was visibly hanging wrong, held to the wing by bolts failing one by one. Altitude 300 feet, Jade called out. Speed is good. Descent rate is good. More. Landing gear down, now. More through the gear lever. There was a rumble as the landing gear extended and locked. 200 feet, Jade said. Mitchell, don't flare yet. Wait for my command. We need to stay fast and steep until the last possible moment. 100 feet, 50 feet. Wait. The runway rushed up at them incredibly fast. Now. Flare now. Mitchell pulled back on the control yoke. The nose of the aircraft lifted. The aircraft dropped the last 50 feet faster than any normal landing, but exactly as Jade had planned. The landing gear hit the concrete runway. The impact was brutal. It felt like the plane had been dropped from a building. Passengers screamed. Luggage fell out of the overhead bins. But the landing gear held. The tires didn't blow. The plane stayed straight. As they raced down the runway, still going over 100 miles an hour, the damaged engine mount finally failed completely. The entire engine tore off the wing, tumbling across the runway behind them, leaving a trail of sparks and smoke. But they were already on the ground. They were already safe. The engine couldn't hurt them anymore. Mitchell hit the brakes. The plane decelerated, slower and slower, until finally it stopped. For a moment, nobody in the cockpit spoke. Mitchell was shaking. Moore was crying. Emergency vehicles raced toward them from both sides of the runway. Jade exhaled slowly, feeling the adrenaline drain out of her body for the first time in 3 years. We're down, she said quietly. We're safe. You did good. Both of you did really good. Mitchell turned to look at her, his face pale and sweaty. You just saved all of our lives. I tried to save everyone's lives 3 years ago, Jade said. But nobody wanted to listen to me then. Within 2 hours, Jade Martinez's face was on every news channel in the country. The ghost pilot returns, the headlines said. Falcon saves 267 lives with the defective engine she tried to warn the world about. Video footage from the news helicopters showed the dramatic landing, the engine tearing off the wing, the emergency vehicles rushing to the plane. Reporters called it a miracle. Inside the terminal at Kansas City International, Jade stood surrounded by passengers from Flight 1823. They wanted to thank her. They wanted to shake her hand. They wanted to hug her. Some of them were crying. Derek and Patricia, the flight attendants who hadn't believed her, approached hesitantly. Colonel Martinez, Patricia said, her voice shaking, I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you. I should have believed you. Jade looked at them. She wasn't angry, just tired. You did what you thought was right. I looked like a crazy person. I understand. But you tried to warn us, Derek said, looking like he might cry. You told us exactly what would happen, and we laughed at you. A lot of people laughed at me, Jade said. For 3 years I got used to it. What matters is that everyone is safe now. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, walked up shyly, holding a piece of paper. Are you the pilot lady who saved us? Jade knelt down to be at the girl's eye level. I helped. Yes. My mom says you're a hero. The girl held out the paper. A crayon drawing of a plane, a woman with dark hair, and the words, "Thank you," in big letters. Jade took the drawing carefully, her eyes stinging with tears. Thank you. This is beautiful. Are you really a hero? The girl asked. Jade thought about that question. You know what, sweetie? Sometimes being a hero just means telling the truth even when nobody believes you, and then waiting, even when it's hard to wait, until people finally listen. That's all I did. The girl hugged her. Jade hugged her back and tried very hard not to cry. Then she heard a familiar voice. Colonel Martinez. She stood up and turned around. General Hawthorne was walking toward her, surrounded by military personnel in uniform. He was older than she remembered. More gray hair, more wrinkles, but his eyes were the same. General, Jade said. She didn't salute. She wasn't in the military anymore. Colonel, he said, and then he did something that shocked her. He saluted her first. She automatically saluted back. Old habits. We owe you an apology, General Hawthorne said. A huge apology. You were right about everything. The X-7 engines, the defect, the danger. We should have believed you 3 years ago. I should have protected you. I'm sorry. Jade didn't know what to say. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times over the past 3 years, the moment when someone finally admitted she had been right. But now that it was happening, she felt numb. Thank you, she said quietly. We want you back, General Hawthorne said. Test pilot, your rank restored, full honors, full back pay for the 3 years. Everything you lost, we'll give it back to you. Jade looked at him, at the military officers standing behind him. She thought about the life she had lost, the career she had loved, flying test aircraft, pushing the limits, being Falcon. No, she said. General Hawthorne blinked. No, with respect, General, I'm not interested in going back to my old job. That part of my life is over. But I am interested in making sure what happened today never happens again. I want to lead a team that redesigns safety protocols for commercial aircraft engines. I want to make sure that when someone discovers a defect, they're protected, not threatened, not fired, not forced to disappear. I want to create a system where corporations can't hide safety problems just because it's expensive to admit the truth. General Hawthorne was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. Done. You can write your own job description, Colonel. Whatever you need, whatever authority you need, it's yours. And one more thing, Jade said. I want full whistleblower protection for any pilot, engineer, or technician who reports safety concerns, legal protection, financial protection, career protection. I don't want anyone else to go through what I went through. You have my word, General Hawthorne said. Welcome back, Falcon. The news that the X-7 engines had failed exactly as Colonel Martinez had predicted 3 years earlier sent shockwaves through the aviation industry. Within 24 hours, the FAA grounded every aircraft flying with turbine X-7 engines. Hundreds of planes were pulled from service. Airlines lost millions of dollars every day, but nobody complained. Everyone had seen the video of the engine tearing off Flight 1823's wing. Apex Industries' stock price crashed. Within a week, the company lost half its value. Within a month, the CEO and 3 senior executives were arrested on criminal charges, including fraud, falsifying safety reports, and conspiracy. Congressional hearings began. The Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation called Colonel Jade Martinez to testify. 6 months after Flight 1823, Jade stood in a hearing room in Washington, D.C., facing senators, cameras, and journalists from around the world. Captain Mitchell and First Officer Moore were in the audience. So were Derek and Patricia. So were many of the passengers from Flight 1823. And sitting in the back row, looking uncomfortable, were 3 Apex Industries executives who hadn't been arrested yet. Jade wore her Air Force uniform for the first time in 3 years. The eagles on her shoulders had been restored. She was Colonel Martinez again. She was Falcon again. But she wasn't here for revenge. She was here to change the system. "Thank you for allowing me to speak today," Jade began. She didn't read from notes. She spoke from the heart. 3 years ago, I discovered a fatal defect in the Turbodyne X7 engine. I found stress fractures in the turbine blades that I knew would cause catastrophic failure. I reported what I found. I presented data. I showed my evidence to everyone who would look at it. And I was ignored. I was told I was wrong. I was told I was lying. I was told I was trying to hurt a successful American company. When I refused to stay quiet, I was removed from my job. I was forced to retire. I was threatened. Someone broke into my apartment and stole all my research. Someone tried to run me off the road. So I disappeared. I moved to a small town where nobody knew me. I took a job that had nothing to do with aviation. I stopped talking about the defect because talking about it almost got me killed. For 3 years, I lived with the knowledge that those defective engines were flying. Every day, I wondered if today would be the day my prediction came true. Every day I wondered if people would die because nobody had listened to me. Then, 6 months ago, I got on Flight 1823. I didn't want to fly. I hadn't flown in 3 years, but my nephew was getting married and I couldn't miss his wedding. When I checked in, I asked what engines the plane had. The answer was Turbodyne X7S. At 35,000 feet, I felt the vibration I had felt 3 years earlier in test flights. I knew what it meant. I tried to warn the flight crew. I told them I was a test pilot. I told them about the defect. They didn't believe me. They thought I was crazy. They almost had me restrained. Then the engine exploded exactly as I had predicted. 267 people almost died. That day, they survived because I had enough knowledge and experience to land that aircraft safely. But they shouldn't have been in danger in the first place. I'm not here today to say I told you so. I'm not here to punish the people who didn't believe me. I'm here to make sure this never happens again. I'm here to say that we need to protect whistleblowers who speak up about safety issues. We need to protect engineers and pilots and technicians who see problems and report them. Right now, if you discover a defect that costs a company money, you get fired, you get threatened, you have to disappear like I did. That has to change. We need laws that protect people who report safety concerns. We need to make it illegal for companies to retaliate against whistleblowers. We need to give regulatory agencies like the FAA real power to investigate safety claims even when big companies say those claims are wrong. We need to create a system where the truth matters more than profit, where safety matters more than stock prices, where doing the right thing doesn't destroy your career. 3 years ago, I told the truth about a dangerous defect. I was laughed at. I was dismissed. I was threatened. I had to disappear. But I never stopped being right. And when that engine exploded on Flight 1823, when the pilots realized they needed help, when the choice was between letting me try to save the plane or watching everyone die, that's when they finally listened. They laughed when I said, "I'm Falcon." They thought a tired woman in economy class couldn't possibly be a legendary test pilot. But I was Falcon. I am Falcon. I never stopped being Falcon. I just stopped announcing it, because announcing it put my life in danger. I'm asking you today to make sure the next person who discovers a defect doesn't have to hide. The next pilot who sees a problem doesn't have to choose between their career and saving lives. The next engineer who finds a flaw doesn't have to be afraid. Make it safe to tell the truth. Make it protected by law. Make it impossible for companies to bury safety problems. Because the quiet person in economy class might know more than everyone in first class combined. The person everyone dismisses might be the person who can save lives. The truth doesn't care where you're sitting on the plane, and expertise doesn't disappear just because you're wearing jeans instead of a uniform. They laughed when I said, "I'm Falcon." They won't laugh anymore, and neither will anyone else who tries to speak up about danger. Jade stopped talking. The hearing room was completely silent. Then Captain Mitchell stood up and started clapping. First Officer Moore stood up. The passengers from Flight 1823 stood up. Soon the entire room was standing, applauding. Even the senators were clapping. Jade looked at the Apex Industries executives in the back row. They weren't clapping. They were staring at the floor. Good, she thought. Let them be uncomfortable. Let them know their time is over. 1 year after Flight 1823, major changes had happened. Congress passed the Aviation Whistleblower Protection Act. It made retaliation against people who report safety concerns a federal crime. It gave whistleblowers legal protection, financial support, and guaranteed job security. Companies that tried to silence people who reported safety problems would face massive fines and criminal charges. The FAA created a new independent safety review board whose only job was to investigate safety concerns reported by pilots, engineers, and technicians. The board had the power to ground aircraft, recall engines, and overrule company executives, and it reported directly to Congress, not to the aviation industry. Apex Industries went bankrupt. The company was broken apart and sold. Every single X-7 engine was scrapped, and airlines replaced them with safer engines from other manufacturers. The executives who had hidden the defect and threatened Jade went to prison. Jade Martinez became director of the Aviation Safety Initiative, a new government agency created to prevent what had happened with the X-7 engines from ever happening again. She had a team of 50 engineers, pilots, and safety experts who investigated every safety report that came in and protected the people who spoke up about problems. She also started teaching. Once a month, she visited aviation schools and talked to student pilots. She told them her story. She told them that being a pilot wasn't just about flying, it was about speaking up when something was wrong, even when people didn't want to listen. The hardest thing about being a pilot, she told her students, isn't learning to fly. It's learning to trust yourself when everyone else says you're wrong. It's finding the courage to keep telling the truth even when the truth is inconvenient, expensive, or dangerous. The students always asked her the same question: were you scared when the engine exploded? No, Jade would answer honestly. I wasn't scared during the explosion, because I knew what to do. I had trained for that moment. What scared me was the 3 years before the explosion, when nobody believed me, when I was alone with the knowledge that people would die and I couldn't stop it. That was terrifying. The explosion was almost a relief, because it finally proved I was right. One day, a young woman came to Jade's office. Her name was Sarah Chen. She was an aerospace engineer working for a major aircraft manufacturer. Colonel Martinez, Sarah said nervously, I need your help. Call me Jade. What's wrong? I found something. A problem with the new composite materials we're using in wing structures. The materials are lighter and cheaper than metal, so the company loves them. But I found microfractures in test samples. I think the fractures could spread under stress. I think wings could fail in flight. Jade listened carefully. She heard the fear in Sarah's voice. She remembered feeling exactly the same fear 3 years ago. Have you reported it? Jade asked. Yes, to my supervisor. He told me I was wrong. He said the materials had been tested extensively and passed all safety requirements. He said if I kept talking about it, I would be fired. What do you want to do? Sarah looked at Jade with desperate eyes. I want to do the right thing, but I'm scared. I need this job. I have student loans. My mom is sick, and I help pay her medical bills. If I lose my job, I don't know what I'll do. But if I stay quiet and wings start failing and people die, I don't know how I'll live with that either. Jade stood up and walked around her desk. She sat in the chair next to Sarah. Sarah, I'm going to tell you what I wish someone had told me 3 years ago. You're not alone. You don't have to fight this battle by yourself. That's why this agency exists. That's why we passed the whistleblower protection laws. You can report this problem, and we will investigate it. Your job is protected by federal law. Your company cannot fire you, cannot demote you, cannot punish you in any way. If they try, they go to jail. Really. And more than that, if your concerns turn out to be valid, you'll be rewarded, not just protected. The new laws say whistleblowers whose reports prevent safety disasters get financial compensation. We do that because we want to encourage people to speak up. We want to make doing the right thing the profitable thing. Sarah was crying now, but they were tears of relief. I was so scared. I thought I would have to choose between doing the right thing and paying my mom's medical bills. You don't have to choose anymore, Jade said. That's what we changed. Now tell me everything you know about these composite materials. Sarah told her. Jade listened, took notes, asked technical questions. When Sarah was done, Jade picked up her phone and called her team. We have a new investigation. Possible structural defect in composite wing materials. I want a full technical review by the end of the week, and I want legal protection activated for the engineer who reported it. Her name is Sarah Chen, and she's a hero for speaking up." After Sarah left, Jade stood at her office window, looking out at the sky. She could see planes flying past in the distance, leaving white contrails against the blue. Every one of those planes was full of people. People going to weddings, going home to family, going on vacation, going to funerals, going to new jobs, going to see old friends, ordinary people living their lives, trusting that the aircraft carrying them through the sky was safe. They would never know Sarah Chen's name. They would never know that a young engineer had found a defect, reported it, and probably saved their lives. That was okay. Sarah didn't need to be famous. She just needed to be protected. That's what Jade had built, a system where people like Sarah could do the right thing without destroying their lives. It had taken 3 years of hiding. It had taken an engine explosion. It had taken nearly dying. But she had built something that mattered. Jade's phone buzzed. It was a text from her nephew, the one who had gotten married. "Aunt Jade, we just found out we're having a baby. You're going to be a great aunt." Jade smiled. Life was moving forward. Good things were happening. She texted back, "Congratulations. I can't wait to meet the little one. Love you." Then she went back to work. There were more safety reports to review, more investigations to manage, more whistleblowers to protect, because the work was never done. There would always be another defect to find, another problem to solve, another person who needed protection for telling the truth. But now, finally, the system was on the side of truth tellers instead of against them. Jade thought about that day on Flight 1823. She thought about sitting in seat 27E, invisible and dismissed, knowing disaster was coming and being powerless to stop it. She thought about the moment the engine exploded, when everything she had warned about came true. She thought about the moment in the cockpit when Captain Mitchell and First Officer Moore finally believed her, finally trusted her, finally listened. And she thought about the words she had spoken to that little girl in the airport. Sometimes being a hero just means telling the truth even when nobody believes you. That was still true. That would always be true. The quiet person in economy class might save your life. The dismissed engineer might prevent a disaster. The whistleblower everyone calls crazy might be the only sane person in the room. And when that moment comes, when the engine explodes, when the crisis hits, when lives hang in the balance, that's when everyone realizes they should have listened from the beginning. Jade, Falcon, Martinez had learned that lesson the hardest way possible. Now she was making sure the next person who tried to tell the truth wouldn't have to learn it the same way. The pilots had laughed when she said, "I'm Falcon." They had dismissed her, mocked her, refused to believe her until the engine exploded exactly as she predicted, until military jets scrambled and General Hawthorne heard her voice on the radio, until she saved 267 lives using the same aircraft she had tried to warn the world about 3 years earlier. They weren't laughing anymore. Nobody would laugh at whistleblowers anymore. Not in aviation, not in any industry where safety mattered more than profit. Because Falcon had fought that battle and won, and she had made sure that future Falcons wouldn't have to fight alone. Outside Jade's window, another plane flew past, climbing toward the clouds. She watched it rise higher and higher until it disappeared into the blue. Safe flight, she thought. Safe flight to everyone on board. And thanks to what she had built, thanks to what she had changed, that plane was safer than it would have been before. The pilots were safer to report problems. The engineers were safer to tell the truth. The passengers were safer because the people who built and maintained their aircraft were finally protected when they spoke up about danger. That was victory. Not the dramatic landing, not the vindication, not even the congressional testimony. The real victory was this: a system that valued truth over profit, safety over convenience, and human lives over corporate balance sheets. Jade sat back down at her desk and opened the next safety report that needed her attention. She smiled. Falcon was exactly where she belonged, watching over the skies, protecting the people who flew through them, and making sure the truth always had a voice. And if anyone ever tried to silence that voice again, well, they would learn what everyone on Flight 1823 had learned. You can dismiss Falcon, you can mock her, you can refuse to believe her, but you cannot make her wrong. And when the moment of truth comes, When the engine explodes, when the crisis hits, when lives need saving, you will wish you had listened from the very beginning. Because Falcon never stopped being Falcon, she just waited for the moment when her voice mattered most. And when that moment came, she was ready. She had always been ready.